They said the Charlie Kirk case was settled. They said the Fort Huachuca angle was irrelevant. They said Candace Owens crossed a line. But the moment an incident report intersected with the Charlie Kirk assassination timeline, the reaction was immediate and aggressive. And that reaction is now part of the story. This investigation sits at the intersection of three sensitive elements: a high-profile assassination, a military-linked location, and a document that people want forgotten as quickly as possible. Tonight, we slow this down, because when a case involving Charlie Kirk is declared over without transparency, history tells us to look closer. Candace Owens did not claim to solve the Charlie Kirk assassination. She did something far more limited and far more dangerous. She released a record. That record referenced Fort Huachuca and aligned with a timeline connected to Mitch Snow, a name that has surfaced repeatedly in discussions surrounding the hours and movements linked to Charlie Kirk's final known activity. What followed was not careful review, it was instant rejection. Within hours, voices rushed forward to say the document proved nothing, meant nothing, and should never have been shared. The word debunked spread faster than any explanation ever did. But when a document tied to an assassination sparks urgency rather than clarity, that urgency deserves examination. Before we continue, if you value careful reporting on cases others rush past, subscribing helps support this channel. Turning on notifications ensures you stay informed when new details emerge, not just when headlines change. Now let's continue. The Charlie Kirk assassination has always carried unanswered know this, and anyone familiar with official reporting knows this. Yet critics collapsed these distinctions into a single narrative and presented it as final. That is not analysis, that is compression. When you expand the timeline instead of compressing it, gaps appear. Not accusations, gaps, and gaps are where investigations begin. Then comes the FOIA argument. Several commentators insisted that Freedom of Information Act requests already ruled out any relevance between Fort Huachuca and the Charlie Kirk assassination. But again, the details matter. FOIA responses depend entirely on how a request is written. A narrow request produces narrow results. A response stating no additional documents were found does not mean no documents exist. It means none were located under that exact scope. So far, the full FOIA language has not been publicly released. The agencies contacted have not been fully clarified, and follow-up requests have not been addressed. Yet FOIA is being used as the final word. That is not how public records work. Another issue is the response strategy. Several individuals who publicly described themselves as defenders of truth surrounding the Charlie Kirk case chose to challenge Candace Owens openly rather than privately. This occurred while Candace was away and unable to respond in real time. That choice is notable. If the concern was factual accuracy, private communication would have sufficed. If the concern was public safety, clarity would have been emphasized. Instead, certainty was weaponized. Candace Owens responded carefully. She did not accuse anyone of involvement in the Charlie Kirk assassination. She did not claim the report proved guilt. She questioned why scrutiny itself was being treated as misconduct. She pointed out that the reaction to Fort Huachuca seemed disproportionate to the content of the document, and she suggested that the rush to shut the conversation down was revealing. In cases involving assassinations, reactions often matter as much as evidence. Ask yourself this: why is asking questions about a timeline treated as harmful? Why is reviewing an incident report framed as irresponsible? Why is the word finished being repeated so often? If the Charlie Kirk case is fully understood, scrutiny should strengthen it. If it is fragile, scrutiny exposes that fragility. This channel does not promote conclusions, it examines records. If you have followed the Charlie Kirk case closely, your perspective matters. Share what stands out to you. Thoughtful comments add depth to investigations like this. Now back to the facts. The Fort Huachuca report does not exist in isolation. It exists within a broader landscape of movement logs, communication gaps, and unresolved timing questions connected to the Charlie Kirk assassination. When critics dismiss it in a sentence, they are not protecting the truth. They are narrowing the lens. The report confirms activity. It confirms documentation. It confirms that something was recorded when people insist nothing relevant occurred. That alone warrants attention. As of now, no comprehensive explanation has been offered that resolves the Fort Huachuca timeline, addresses FOIA limitations transparently, and explains the intensity of the backlash all at once. Instead, the public is being told to trust confidence over process. History urges caution with that request, because every major assassination case that later unraveled began with the same demand: stop asking questions. This is settled. Move on. The Charlie Kirk assassination remains one of the most consequential political crimes of its time. Any document that even brushes against its timeline deserves examination, not dismissal. And so this story remains open, not because controversy is useful, but because the record is incomplete. And until the unanswered questions surrounding Fort Huachuca, the incident report, and the Charlie Kirk timeline receive clear, unified explanations, declaring this chapter closed may be the most dangerous assumption of all. We keep watching, we keep reading, and we keep asking questions, because in cases like this, silence has never protected the truth. What has also gone largely unexamined is how quickly complexity was treated as inconvenience. In serious cases, complexity is expected. Multiple timelines, overlapping jurisdictions, incomplete records, none of that is unusual. What is unusual is how often those elements are framed as reasons to stop looking rather than reasons to look closer. Another point now surfacing quietly involves chain of custody questions, not about the document itself, but about how related information moves between offices, databases, and review stages. When records touch more than one system, delays and mismatches occur. That is documented practice, not speculation. Yet no one dismissing the story has addressed whether such handoffs could explain the inconsistencies they claim are impossible. They simply skip past it. There is also the matter of selective certainty. Some details connected to the Charlie Kirk case are treated as fixed, while others are suddenly described as flexible or irrelevant, depending on what supports the preferred conclusion. That inconsistency is subtle, but it matters. Investigations do not work that way. You cannot lock one timestamp in stone while allowing another to float without justification. You cannot demand strict standards for one record and casual interpretation for another. Standards must be consistent. So far, they have not been. Behind the scenes, sources familiar with record handling procedures have raised quiet concerns about how confidently the public narrative has been framed, not because they see proof of wrongdoing, but because they see unanswered process questions being waved away. Those concerns have not been addressed publicly. Instead, attention keeps shifting back to tone, to optics, to who should or should not have asked questions in the first place. That shift is revealing. When process becomes uncomfortable, focus moves elsewhere. Another overlooked detail is how often official silence is being interpreted as confirmation. Silence is being treated as validation, rather than what it usually is in sensitive matters, neutrality. Agencies do not comment for many reasons: ongoing reviews, jurisdictional limits, internal policy. Silence does not equal closure, yet it is being used that way. Candace Owens has continued to resist that interpretation. Her position has not escalated, it has not expanded, it has remained focused on one thing: unresolved discrepancies deserve explanation. That position has placed her not. Another angle now emerging involves how public confidence is manufactured. Repetition is powerful and dangerous. It trains audiences to mistake agreement for accuracy. In this situation, agreement arrived faster than documentation. That sequence should always trigger caution. None of this proves misconduct, none of this assigns blame, none of this resolves the Charlie Kirk case, but it does demonstrate that the current narrative rests on confidence rather than completion, and completion has not occurred. There are still unanswered questions about timing alignment, still unanswered questions about record scope, still unanswered questions about why scrutiny itself provoked such an intense response. Those questions remain open, not because they are dramatic, but because they are unresolved. And unresolved questions do not disappear simply because they are inconvenient. They wait. They surface later, often when least expected, often when confidence has hardened into certainty. For now, the documents still exist, the timelines still contain gaps, and the reactions still outpace the explanations. That is where this stands. Not concluded, not dismissed, not resolved, just unfinished. And unfinished stories have a way of continuing whether anyone wants them to or not.